Hey everyone, so here's our Patreon Ask GN. If you have questions, as always, put them in the Discord chat. I'll hit them in this one or the public one. Also, small change, I think we're going to start uploading these probably to the GN Steve channel instead. Still unlisted and everything, but I am paranoid about YouTube seeing videos that get 134 views that are unlisted and like penalizing us somehow, because no one knows how YouTube works, including people who work there, because it's all algorithmic at this point. Not saying that's a bad thing, but we're going to put them on the GN Steve channel. First question was, do you have any general thoughts regarding cryptocurrency, positive or negative, outside of the mining and proof of work controversy? I would assume the mining controversy here is GPU availability. Proof of work controversy, I would assume, is like absurd power consumption. You said outside of those. I'll start with those though. For GPUs and gamer availability, I still really think that a lot of it is like NVIDIA is gearing up to make the next architecture. They're not making as many Pascal cards. GPU memory prices are higher because all memory prices are higher. I think those affect availability more than anything else. Proof of work, I am not informed enough on cryptocurrency to even begin to talk about proof of work versus proof of stake. I just know that those are two phrases that are associated with cryptocurrency. And I understand what the general idea is for both of them, but I don't know when you would use one versus the other. So I'm not qualified to comment on it. However, I will say, clearly there's a power consumption problem. I don't know if any of the like power-oriented cryptos will help solve that, or hopefully we can push continually towards solar and other renewables if this is going to be a big thing that's going forward, because it's a whole lot of power to do. So I'd love to see some kind of solution to that. And if you're informed on this subject, please let me know what the current status of that is, because I don't know. And maybe it's already been discussed. General thoughts regarding cryptocurrency. I mean, I think the fact that we have this audience where gamers or people who can't build a computer feel like they're at war with miners, I think that's a bit hyperbolic. Like, that's taking it a little far. So I think I'll quote Paul. Paul had a good tweet many months ago, or YouTube comment, where someone asked him what he thought of crypto miners. And he said something about it, some opinion, and then he said, but I'm not going to begrudge anyone trying to make a buck. So, I mean, I'll say the same thing. I think it's very interesting. I think there's a future in blockchain. I don't know what it is. The fact that I've seen some interesting ideas with blockchain, like I think Kodak's was like using it to identify stolen photography in a more accessible way. That was pretty interesting. I know the Canadian government's been looking into it for some kind of like accountability for politicians. It's kind of interesting. So I don't really know where it's going. I don't have like a strong negative or positive feeling towards it. I find it to be interesting technology, and I don't understand enough about it. And if anyone wants to educate me, go ahead and do it, because I don't have the time to go do it myself for this. So next one, a balanced diet. Said, what techniques do you use to kale manage your hair? Well, I think we have an advertisement on that somewhere, featuring the EVGA cable combs. They're not an advertiser of this, but that's probably a pretty good start. We've previously, for our 50,000 subscriber video, we did that thing where we were like, it was like a Cribs style parody, I guess. Yo, welcome to my crib. Come on in. So we got all this stuff right here in the trash can. That's my L'Oreal, that's my Pantene. We got this up here, that's my boy. That's my favorite statue in this place. All right, so tub of thermal paste, this compressed air to dry out, instead of a blow dryer. And then we got some of this anti-static mat cleaner deep down in the roots, you know what I'm talking about? That's how we get this right here. Hang on, I'll give you. So, and talked about using thermal paste in my hair. I think those are your two main points to look at. Never did anything for 100 or 200,000 subscribers, but that was our 50K one. Next one, RJ Fleming, 82. With all your data, can you show how much do GPU drivers improve performance and power consumption on AMD versus NVIDIA. From what I've read, is vBIOS updated via driver update? Not much concrete on this online. So last question first. vBIOS can be updated. I'm trying to think of which card did it. I want to say the RX 480 did something like that with its initial like PCIe slot draw issue that was resolved through a driver update. I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was. And some things like so AMD has an interesting thing. They have a hardware scheduler in their architecture. It's part of the GPU. So there's a thing called a hardware scheduler. I think there's typically two of them on the modern GPU architecture designs. The hardware scheduler on the newer versions of GCN, I think that would be the Fury onward, from Fiji onward with GCN, the hardware scheduler can be updated. Its microcode can be updated. So it can be flashed, like firmware more or less. I think you can push those updates through drivers. So that's kind of cool and a bit unique to that design. The question about, with all your, oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, you definitely can change vBIOS through updates like that, because there are instances where both AMD and NVIDIA have incinerated consumer cards accidentally by changing the fan profile in a way that it was not aggressive enough, and the cards would burn themselves out by running at a higher power target and a lower fan speed, and therefore burn out, which was resolved through another BIOS update. And I don't know whatever happened to those customers, but hopefully they were compensated for it. So yeah, the other part of your question, with all your data, can you show how much the GPU drivers impact performance? I'm not going to put a bunch of charts together. We do have the data to support an analysis on it, but I kind of already know the answer to this. The quick answer is, historically, when we've validated what AMD and NVIDIA say in their driver notes for how much a driver improves a particular game's performance by X percentage, we've found that those statements by AMD and NVIDIA have been largely accurate. And it's good, but obviously you never take them at face value, never take anyone at their word if they're selling you a product. But the teams that put those numbers together for driver updates are not the same teams necessarily that are selling you the product. And they also, again, I found them to be typically accurate. So some numbers recently, there was like a 39% or something, 29% performance uplift in Sea of Thieves from an AMD driver patch with 1920 by 1080, I think. Destiny 2 had an update for AMD and NVIDIA that was significant at 1440p highest for both of them. It was a massive change. We have a video and an article on that. I don't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but it was nearing 50%. So it was a lot. Drivers can do a lot of things. They optimize shaders. So you find some shader path that's really not interacting with your hardware properly. Probably the game developer didn't really know the best way to go about whatever effect they were trying to render. And so the driver engineers go in there and they clean it all up through specific driver updates, which is actually really crazy if you think about it, because that means that for every major game, you need basically new drivers. That's a lot of ongoing work for driver engineers. Driver engineering workload theoretically would go down as DirectX 12 and Vulkan adoption increase, because now you're moving a lot of that responsibility onto engine developers and onto the game developers. I think that the driver engineers will still pull a lot of that weight, because game developers aren't particularly good right now at optimizing game code for hardware. It's not really their job. They're trying to ship a game inside of a couple of years. That's not their job as far as they're concerned. So you still have driver engineers stepping in a lot. But yeah, so to answer your question, I've seen as much as 30+%. I've seen as low as 5%. Depends on the game, but typically when you see AMD and NVIDIA say what percentage they expect, you can assume that's reasonably accurate. If you want to be safe, subtract a couple percent. But I've not really run into instances where those numbers are seriously inaccurate, like I have with marketing data for the sale of a product, as opposed to technical data for the technical support of a product via drivers. Those tend to be a bit more accurate. Next one, Dizlex666 says, how different are RAM voltages versus hardware info's readings? I ask because getting FDI at close to spec on Ryzen needs voltage bumps. DDR4 at least has a fairly well-spec'd voltage range, up to 1.5 volts for safe voltage. But how accurate are motherboards and readings for these? They're pretty accurate. in my experience, it's not. First of all, DRAM can take a lot of voltage, and secondly, more than 1.5. But secondly, it's not really the same situation as vCore or VSOC. DRAM can take more. It's a bit more tolerant of some millivolt offset disparity, and I haven't found it to be super inaccurate. So yeah, hardware info is pretty good, I think, for DRAM voltage. I've never really had a problem with it specifically. And that also doesn't change a lot. Next one, Crash Test Genius. I think this is the last one. What are your favorite pieces of old hardware? What were your earliest computer systems? What were the specs of the first computers you built or used? First that I used, I had like E-Machines and Northgate. If anyone remembers Northgate, I think that was their name. They're a system integrator. They were pretty good systems because we upgraded them and put a discrete GPU in it. And I don't remember what those first GPUs were. I probably still have them. But those would be probably Windows 95 or 98 machines. And first one I built was a Pentium 4. It was the first hyper-threaded chip, if I remember correctly. It was a Pentium 4 hyper-threaded. And the GPU, at some point, if not initially, was it was either an ATI X800 or X1800. I can't remember which one came out that year. But it was a 512 megabyte GPU. It was I think $600, $500 or $600 when it came out, that card. I want to say it was, I don't know, it was X800 or 1800. One came out much later than the other one. So I got the earlier of those two. And what else was in there? I remember the second system I built pretty well. I remember that one, I spent $100 on 4 gigabytes of RAM. So not unlike today. And it was DDR, I want to say it was DDR2 probably. It's probably DDR2, maybe, yeah, it was probably 2. Patriot memory, 4 gigabytes of it. It was pretty high-end stuff at the time. That, I don't remember that. That was a Q6600 CPU. Next one I did was an i7-930. So pretty big jumps. I was trying to stick with flagships for each era because I would wait like 3 to 4 years, well, probably 3 to 4 years between builds. The first system though, we should pull out at some time and do a video because that was in an Antec Super Landboy was the case, not the Landboy Air, I don't think. The Super Landboy, small, silver box with an acrylic window in it, and it was like one of the only ones that had an acrylic window at CompUSA. And I took a 120 millimeter hole saw, drilled 2 holes in the acrylic, put 2 fans in it, so you can see that the thermal thing started kind of early, and set those as, I tried a few things. I did like 1 intake, 1 exhaust, dual intake, dual exhaust. Dual intake worked the best, cooled the CPU and the GPU like crazy, and helped with initial overclocking efforts. So we'll talk about that one at some point. Cable management was 0 in both the case and in my interest in doing it. So it was massive cable clutter. Modular power supplies weren't really a thing, and it looked about like you'd expect it. I think I had cold cathode tubes in there too. So yeah, so those are the builds. But thanks for the questions. If you have more for next Patreon Ask GN thing, post them in the Discord. I'll find them there. And yeah, let us know what you want to know next time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.